Welcome to the latest episode of SaaS Stories. I'm very honored to be joined by my latest guest, Abhishek from KushoAl. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Joanna. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Of course, I'm really excited to learn about your journey today. Now, I always start my questioning around really the kind of mission that you're on and how you came across this challenge specifically when you decided to start KushoAl. So tell me a little bit about yourself. What inspired you to start it? And also, how does it address common pain points for developers in API testing?
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much. So I think Kusho comes from something very personal, from very personal experience that I've had. So going back to my journey over the last almost 7, 8 years now, I started my career as a data scientist, and as a result, had to deploy a lot of data models to production. Had to take starting from very basic models to like very heavy machine learning AI models to production, and I personally saw the kind of impact that errors can have on final business outcomes, right? The whole business teams, etc., are completely dependent on the platform working as expected. And these are small glitches that can cause big errors downstream. And that's where kind of I first started realizing that, the importance of having error-free code and error-free software and simply software that performs as expected. Now to my last job, and I think that's where a lot of these ideas were solidified, where I used to work for, India's largest e-commerce marketplace. And as a result, we used to have millions of users coming in every day to the platform, right? And I used to work for the pricing team. I used to work as a product manager. And again, the same issue, right? We used to work really hard to ensure that our users have a bug-free and error-free experience. But that's something that was humanly very difficult to do because to have a bug-free and error-free experience, you have to ensure that your code is bug-free and error-free. And with the kind of complexities that exist in production code, especially when you're catering to millions of people, the number of scenarios, etc., that you need to test out, the number of situations that you could find yourself in is almost infinitely high. And to be able to actually counter all those situations, you need to work those things with logic into your code. And that's something that, personally found it very difficult and something that was very hard to solve. And that's how kind of the idea behind Kusho came about, where we realized that there's a lot to do in terms of making software more robust. If you just look at the data, right, the world loses a lot of money to errors. If you look at the downstream
Yeah.
impact of errors in code, etc., you will see that it goes into trillions of dollars. And this is just the US because we don't really have a lot
Wow.
of data in the rest of the world. But the amount of money business loses to just having like, errors in programs and errors in software, it goes into trillions of dollars. And that's just monetary impact from the US. I think world over, it would be a much higher number. So there's a problem that was waiting to be solved. And I think that's why, Kusho AI, because I think AI is one of the largest levers that lets us solve this problem.
Yeah.
And that's how this entire company came about.
Wonderful. What an incredible idea. I think I've definitely come across this, and what a relief, I think, for a lot of SaaS founders listening to this, thinking, what one of the biggest e-commerce company in India was dealing with this issue as well. So it's definitely common, not just with startups, but I think with a lot of the big ones as well. Now starting even though it's a great idea, I think starting a SaaS business is never without its hurdles. Can you share maybe like a particularly challenging moment that you had when going to market with KushoAl?
Yeah, yeah. I think there've been a lot of challenging moments. I think, like you said, it's never easy to get something from an idea on paper to actually a working business, and I think that's been like a journey of its own. There were problems and challenges at every stage. Like right from validating the problem, for example, right? There are a lot of problems, but as a SaaS founder, you want to be solving something that is a top of mind problem for people because everyone's dealing with problems, right? But uh, as a user, they need to be motivated to solve the problem as much as you are to help them solving it, right? So
Mm.
something that is extremely top of mind for them, which incidentally is a little hard to find unless you go and start talking to these users, spending time with them. B, there needs to be money out there to solve it because there's a lot of problems that are just not funded. And typically you would think that, the bigger the problem is or the bigger it feels, there's, as much money to fund that funds solving that problem. But typically that usually isn't the case, right? it's not a one-to-one relationship. So finding the right mix of problems that companies are willing to pay to solve, right?
Mm.
It could be something that aligns with their goals and their visions for the company, but it should be something that the company wants to pay to solve. At the same time, the user is typically not the company, right? The company buys your software. The person using it is the actual sort of MVP in the situation, right? The person using it is who matters, and if that person, if they are willing to spend time on your software, I think that is the mix you need to find. So like I said, just to recap, right, something that the company wants to pay for, but it's also a problem that the user wants solved, they want it solved, right? So I think a mix of these two, because a lot of ideas fall into one bucket but don't really check the other box, right? So I think that was the first challenge, finding something that gets validated across both
Yeah.
these two check boxes. So I think that was a little difficult. That took us some time. We went into the market with a lot of different problems trying to solve them. Like I said, the overall goal for us was always to make software development easier, was to make code bug free, error free, make sure software works as expected. But finding validation for the right problem to solve, I think that took some time. I think for us, I mean, I'm sorry, I know you asked for one challenge, but that's just one
No, no,
that popped up
share
in
more,
mind that
please.
I would love to talk about. I think it's hard to focus, like I said, because in this journey, at a lot of points, you'll feel like, hey, because you're learning more about the user, you're learning more about the customer as you build for them, right? As you talk to them. And at a lot of points, just you'll feel like, hey, there's this other problem that my user told me about today, and she really feels the problem and she really wants a solution for it. So should I add an element of that, to what
Mm.
I'm building, to my platform? Should I, so just staying focused is really, really hard,
Yeah.
because once you really get, like into the weeds with the users, with the buyers, and you've spent like months or maybe multiple quarters with them, it's hard to stay focused on what you started off with. So I think that's been particularly difficult. I think it's very hard, especially with AI right now, because there's also a third dimension that you now need to handle, because technically there's so many possibilities being opened up every day. Like when we started off, GPT 3.5 had not launched, and just a few months in, we realized that, hey, there's this foundational model that's launched, that's just capable of handling so much information and giving you responses to questions at a rate that you didn't even know was possible earlier. How do you incorporate that into your solution? How does that compete versus your solution? Right. So there's like so many axes to think of. I think one of the hardest things is to just stay focused on the problem that you're willing to solve. Of course, that doesn't mean that you can't change your vision or change what you set out to solve, but it's important to learn and take the right bits, incorporate the right bits, and be very aware of what you're letting go of and what you're incorporating.
100%. I think staying focused is critical when you're trying to scale and really just, yeah, staying focused on the right sets of problems that you need to solve. Having said that, a day in the life of you, what does that look like? I mean, when you've got so many challenges flying at you, when you're running this business, what does a typical day look like as a co-founder of a fast-growing SaaS company?
Yeah, I think it's very chaotic, but so I think that's what makes it fun. I think at the same time, because there's so many hats you need to wear, right? I mean, you need to, like, I find myself working on product, I find myself working on design,
Yeah.
on engineering challenges, on marketing, on sales, on business development, or figuring out partnerships, investments, handling finances, accounting, like even if, like, there's rent to be negotiated for the office, I mean, you have to be the one doing it, right? So, there's so many different hats. I think that makes it extremely chaotic, but it's also like probably the only job in the world that will let you do like everything from like accounting to like taking like an engineering decision. So I think that's, I find myself extremely grateful to have this opportunity. And every time I get stuck in the chaos, I also, realize that, okay, this is the kind of learning that you get from this. I mean, it's just very hard to find these opportunities. So I think extremely grateful to be in this situation, even though as hard as it might be, it's also the kind of learning that's super accelerated that would have been very hard to find elsewhere. Day in the life, coming back to your question, Johanna, I think it's um, needs to be planned. I think planning and prioritization has really, really helped me, because like you said, right? I mean, with the number of things to do, it gets very difficult to ensure that you are on track. So I think typically the process we follow at Kusho is we have we have our like goals for the year, we have our goals for, and as an early stage startup, these things change and evolve very often, but we
Mm.
ensure that, like what we want to achieve at the end of the month is sort of divided into what we want to achieve at the end of the week. And that's how I prioritize for the day. Because I have to ensure that, okay, maybe if marketing's going okay, I don't need to firefight and help solve anything in marketing. Maybe that can move to next week. But maybe there's like a UX problem that needs immediate solving because users are not getting retained. Maybe they are dropping off, and we spoke to them. We realized that there's a major UX issue that we need to solve for. I would focus on that. Like I would set half the day today to like just iron that out with the team. So yeah, I think a lot of planning, prioritization, but yeah, it's always all over the place. Like
Yeah.
in the middle of that UX session, I might have to pick up some accounting. So always there.
And I hope you get enough sleep at night doing all of those hats and wearing them. I mean, yeah, do you find that, as an early stage SaaS founder can have work-life balance, or is that a complete myth?
Uh, I try my best. I would be lying if I said, I've had perfect work-life balance over the last year and a half or so since I've started this. But I think it's all about like where you draw the boundaries for yourself and how important is it for you. I think the way I look at it, again, like this is again, I'm constantly learning, so this is not uh, I would say advice that would apply to everyone, but the way I've been looking at it is this is at least at the very least a 10-year journey, right?
Yeah,
Running a company and running it well, hopefully a multi-decade journey. uh, to be able to actually do this day in and day out for such a long time, it's definitely a marathon and not a sprint.
yeah,
So if you treat it like that, I think you need to ensure that you can do your best today, tomorrow, but also next week and next month and next year. To be able to do that, you cannot really ignore your health or your, mental health or just generally exercising and ensuring that you are physically and mentally in the right space. So yeah, I think I try to ensure that I sleep well at night and as many hours as I'm supposed to. Sometimes it does, obviously, like things get in the way. If there's something major that's broken, if like there's a major sales pitch that's coming up, or like some implementation that we are doing that needs to go through the door at the right time, you have to lose sleep. But I think that's true for life in general. So that's okay. You can't really plan to that level. But yeah, I do try my best to ensure that.
good
And
to
that's something
hear.
that I personally feel everyone should do. There
Yeah.
could be small bursts in between where you sprint, but you can't like hope to sprint every day for the next 10 years. I think that's just not humanly possible.
No,
So
it's not sustainable, is it? No, I think health and wellness is critical. I love what you said. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I mean, what's the saying? That the overnight success takes about 10 to 15 years to achieve, doesn't it?
absolutely.
Um, Coming back to Kusho AI, basically what you're essentially doing is taking API testing off developers' plates. So how have you seen that has helped organizations? How has it increased developer productivity and creativity? Are they now able to focus on something a lot better than what, aside from API testing?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we started in a niche that we realized would allow us to get into the market and
Mm.
also get our users used to this concept. So the thing with AI and AI enabled tooling is that conceptually it's very new to the world. Uh, Most people, until a few months ago, would not be expecting AI to solve things that it is solving for them today. I don't think 2 years ago anyone thought that, I could use a chatbot to write a poem for some topic or someone or something like that, right? That was just not possible. There's a similar thing that's happening with developer tooling and all other software as well. AI is capable of doing things. And when I say AI, not just like foundational AI, but AI that's been trained to perform a certain objective, agents that have been trained and built to perform a certain objective are capable of doing things that just weren't possible, for machines to do, like even 6 months ago. So there's this whole aspect of, people's imaginations have been limited by what's possible, but suddenly, like, there's no ceiling anymore. So you have to a kind of drive that realization into people, which is why we picked API testing as a starting point. Like, so Kusho AI is not a testing company. Kusho
Mhm.
AI is a company that makes engineering more efficient and engineering teams
Yeah.
more efficient, right? Sorry, just a sec. Sorry about that. Yeah. So coming back to that,
Yeah.
it's not an API testing company. It's not even a testing company. It's a company that makes engineering and software engineering more efficient. The way to do that is, in my mind, and this is something that it's a belief that we at Kusho have always had, and me and my co-founder sort of kind of started from this. We've always looked at software development as more of an art than a science.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment you ask an artist to spend more time cleaning the brushes and tidying up the canvas and like doing all of that work, they spend lesser time on the art.
Yeah.
And art needs, they need to be left by themselves. Everything needs to be ready. They just need to come in and paint. I think it might not be it's slightly exaggerated, but I feel like it's closer to that than to something more operational. Software
Mm.
development it is a creative job by nature, and to be able to focus on the creative aspects of it, you need to free up time. And the way to free up time is to take away all the mundane aspects of the job. Now, that's the thing, right? And that's why API testing. We focus on API testing because microservices architecture is very popular right now. The world of software is largely built up of REST APIs, and that's what we focus on. And one of the most kind of atomic aspects of software today is the API. And if the API breaks, eventually your software, the objective that your software is trying to achieve, tends to break. And which is why if your API is working well, if APIs are interacting well with each other, and if a collection of APIs works well, your software tends to work well, right? So that's where we
Mm.
started. That's what Kusho does today. Kusho tests those processes out for you, those bits of code out for you, and tells you if that's working or that's not working. But that's the starting point. The idea is for Kusho to be able to do all of these things. The idea is for Kusho to be able to take a lot of work off the developer's plate and let them, the developer, focus on writing software, designing software, architecting it to the right efficiencies, ensuring that it works beautifully, like write elegant code, write really good code that works beautifully. While Kusho handles like all the menial stuff, like I mean, it's not menial today, it's not trivial today, but that's where we hope to get to. I mean, we want to make sure that all of these things seem trivial a few years down the line. That if there's a bug, Kusho's going to find it. If there's an integration that's going to break with the front end of the code, Kusho's going to find it and fix it for you. So that's not what you should spend time worrying. The developer should
Mm.
spend time worrying, how do I best design this platform?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I guess it kind of stops them from spending all that time on firefighting and trying to determine where the problem lies, which is not essentially how they want to be spending their times.
yeah,
And I love the metaphor that you used. I've never thought about development being compared to art. I've never seen it that way. So that's very interesting. Um, Market differentiation. It's such a crowded marketplace. Do you find that, there's a lot of competition? I mean, specifically with AI, I just feel like that's exploded all of a sudden. How do you differentiate yourselves? What do you think is the key?
yeah. So I think, in fact, I would look at it sort of from a slightly different perspective. Uh, Despite the fact that AI has led to a lot of developer tools coming up and a lot of startups coming onto the space, I feel like that's a good thing. I would not want it any other way. I feel like
Mm.
market differentiation is actually a lesser problem, a smaller problem today.
Yeah.
The reason I say that is because why do we see so many AI startups today, right? Because there were so many problems that were really old, like these, like just like having errors in code, or not being able to ship bug-free code is like a sorry, extremely sorry about that.
Right.
That's like a 40-year-old problem. I mean, like at the very least, right? Like since software has existed, bugs have existed, right? Why are we solving it today? Because AI has just made it possible for you to take these ambitions and turn them into reality.
Mm.
Everybody's wanted bug-free software. People have tried to solve for it, but the fact that so many people are trying right now just goes to show that it seems a lot more plausible today. And that's the reason why I say market differentiation is not a problem, because there's so many such problems that are really old. that haven't been solved that people are going after solving today. So they're not really competing with us, or we're not competing with them. It's just number of problems that are suddenly solvable has gone up by like 1,000 times today. So despite the fact that you see 100x more companies today trying to solve these problems, there's still more problems than solutions out there. Um, and if you solve it efficiently, if you give time back to the developer, if you give money back to the company, I think there's space for everyone. This is not going to be like one of those winner takes all markets. There's just going to be a lot of winners in the AI space.
Yeah. Are you a developer yourself?
I wouldn't call myself a developer because I think I was more of a data scientist. Even though I did push a lot of code into production, I put a lot of data models, a lot of like machine learning models into production, but I never really wrote production code, so to speak. So I have more of a data science and
Yeah.
analytics background. But my software developer co-founder, Saurabh, he's the CTO of the company. So
Yeah.
he's the software brains of the company, where I bring in more of a product design and data angle to things.
Right. The reason I ask is I've always been curious about this one question, which is if you're going to launch a SaaS startup, should you or your co-founder have development skills, or do you think you can get by without those if you essentially build a good team around you? I've always wondered what has more chance of success.
Yeah, I think that's very contextual to what you're building for, I would say. So if you are, I wouldn't say it's a necessity, no. But depends on the kind of problem you're solving. I think for Kusho specifically, we had to ensure that, we needed to have people with strong backgrounds in software development, data science, product, because it was a very product focused company. And what we are building is, we are catering to software developers. So that makes, you identify better with the user. So I've, spent my entire career working with developers in development teams. So I've been a product manager, been a data scientist, always been a part of software dev teams. My co-founder has been a software developer for the last 8 years. So that really helps because we relate to the user. Also, I think it's a technically challenging problem that we are solving. There's a lot of like technical complexities that we need to deal with. So it helps that both of us come from this background. So I think, yeah, I think for us it was necessary to do this. But let's say you're building software for an industry that you understand really well, and the complexities are uh, not technical, so to speak, but they're more about how do you figure out GTM for that. How do you figure out whether, how to package the solution? What should the platform look like? Stuff like that. In those instances, maybe, if you're building software for, I don't know, just taking a random example for laundromats, for example, right? Maybe it's not so much of a software or technical software engineering challenge, but more about, what do laundromats really need? What kind of software do they need? How do you reach out to them? How do you sell to them? How do you add value to their lives? In that case, I would say, not really necessary, but yeah, I think it's extremely contextual on what you're
Yeah.
building and who you're building it for.
Yeah. I agree. I don't think it's necessary for success, although I would say it's definitely more affordable to have someone with the skill sets as a founder or a co-founder. I think just from a lot of
Yeah.
founders that I've been speaking to, both where they have no development skills and then with development skills, I do find that the initial investment is a lot higher with those
Mhm.
that don't have the skills. But then they bring a whole other wealth of skills, around business, sales, marketing, which are also quite critical at the beginning. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
it's an interesting one. I've always been curious about.
Yeah.
Coming back to AI, you mentioned that word a few times, and I'd love to get your perspective on how you think AI is transforming the SaaS landscape, and where do you think it's headed next?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting time to be
Yes.
building SaaS. Uh, yeah, couldn't have asked for a more exciting time to be in this industry, actually. And especially for traditionally what's been seen as a boring industry, I think it's suddenly become one of the most exciting ones around. Precisely because, like I said, AI has unlocked opportunities that just didn't exist until last year. It's unlocked the ability to solve problems that were just unthinkable for a lot of people. Like it was just not possible to think of it because of the costs being prohibitively high, the time to market being prohibitively high. It was just not possible.
Mm.
What AI is doing is giving us the opportunity to rethink a lot of processes and actually build AI into those processes, which is very different from, let's say, let's look at testing, for example, right? How do you test an API today? You probably have to first understand the API that you're testing, right? Let's say you've built it yourself or you've made a change into the API. You have to first understand how it works. Then you need to think of all the ways it could break. What are the things that are covered in the code? What's not covered? Let's say tomorrow it goes live. Like what sort of scenarios might you see? You need to think of all of those things. You need to think of all of those scenarios, write them down, convert them into code that can be tested, convert them into requests and responses, and basically, write out all those simulations that you thought of mentally. And that's where the limitations come in because there's only so many situations you can think of, right? And there's look at the number of manual processes involved where you have to put a lot of thought into it. Your thought has to be exhaustive, which is just not possible because we are human beings and like we get bored and there's only so much time we have and there's only so much computing capacity we have to think of like, permutations and combinations. Then you have to actually, operationalize all of these, run the tests, analyze the results, make sense of them, go back, make the changes, think of 10 more scenarios, all of that. Now, if you add AI to like an aspect of it, you'll probably solve like, for 10% of the time taken. So today, if you take, let's say, a full day to get a certain level of test efficiency, you'll maybe take 1 hour lesser and you'll get like test efficiency that's maybe 5% better. Now, assume that you know nothing about how to do API testing. You just have the objective in mind, which is at the end of the day, your bug should have fewer. Your code should have fewer bugs. And you think, okay, now I have this super intelligent AI model that's capable of a lot of things. How do you think of it? How do you think of the whole process? You can offload so many of the tasks now. Now you don't need to start with, you can ask the AI model to first understand the API. Then you can ask the AI model to think of all the situations. So in the time that you would have thought of 10 situations, the model's like thought of 10,000. You can then ask them to refine those situations. You can ask them to write the code for it. You can ask the AI model to actually run those situations against the API. At the end of it, it comes back with like, these are the 500 things going wrong. You can use the AI model to help you understand those things. So the whole process is now fundamentally changed. At the end of the day, you've probably achieved efficiency that is 100x more than what you would have done earlier. And you probably don't need to be 100x efficient. So you can actually now complete the whole process in an hour instead of a day
Yeah.
and still be at 50x efficiency. I think that's what AI is doing to a lot of processes. Processes that just, there were incremental changes that were happening, and suddenly there's an opportunity to just think of, if I have to achieve the same outcome, but now I have a supercomputer with me and a super intelligent model with me, how would I do things differently?
Mm.
It's just I think this is what people mean when they say, building products ground up, assuming AI exists now that it actually does, which is what makes it a very exciting time to build in this space. Because even a couple of years earlier, like competing with incumbents or existing large players, etc., was very difficult. But that's the fundamental difference, right? Even if a large player has to reinvent a process, they have to start at the same place like an stage startup does. So just the whole advantage of being in the market for 20 years is severely diminished today. I think that's what's making it super exciting. So it's exciting both for builders in the space like ourselves, also for users and customers, because you'll see software, you'll see tools that will really unlock productivity for you, regardless of what you do. Like you don't need to be a software developer. Like I said, you could be running a laundromat, but suddenly that process also might be super efficient 1 year down the line.
Mm. Do you think there's any negative implications of AI? And the reason I ask is I speak to some developers and I also speak to a lot of copywriters in my industry. And I think obviously they love it. It really, streamlines their tasks and takes a lot of the manual labor away from them. But they've also said to me, I feel like I'm losing my skill at coding a little bit or writing a little bit. I feel like I'm losing what I used to know, like the speed of which I was doing it, the thought process.
Yeah.
And I have to say, like for me as well, I've definitely used it to help me write certain content. And when I do sit down to try and write my own content, I do feel like there's been a bit of a slowdown.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think that's something that's bound to happen. I think I've heard this from a lot of software developers as well,
Mm,
where they've been using some code autocomplete tools and they've been getting annoyed saying, partially it's helped because you don't need to write boilerplate code anymore. You get a lot of templates to work with. So there's a lot of like you get a head start into whatever you're doing. But at the same time, it becomes difficult because at times you're expecting a response, but it doesn't come back with one. A lot of people are worried that people will forget how to write, the basics of software engineering. But I feel like we are going through that part of, the product adoption and tech adoption curve where things will reach a steady state. The tools will get better. How people use them, people will understand better how to use them. We'll discover how to use these tools better to our advantage. I honestly do not think, even in the medium term, this is going to affect. I think this is just going to make writers better. It's going to make software developers better. It's going to probably make every job easier, but it's going to be there's a bit of a learning curve. There's a bit of so then things will be up and down for a while before they stabilize. So I think that's where we are today.
yeah, yeah. Interesting, interesting. Um, Strategic advice for other founders. I'd love maybe not so much what you would say now to other SaaS founders, but say you could have a time machine and you could go back to when you first launched KushoAI. What sort
Yeah.
of advice would you give yourself at that starting point?
Yeah. So I think again, like I think we're also very new in the journey. So I think we're also figuring a lot of things out. So I don't know how qualified I am to give advice to other founders, but I can talk about what's worked well for us. I think that's something that I'm sure of.
Yeah.
I think mistakes are a part of the journey. I don't think there's a way, even if I, in hindsight, can like have a time machine, go back to when we started. With all the knowledge I have today, I still think we would make a bunch of mistakes. They might be slightly different mistakes, but we're going to make them anyway. I think that's just a part of doing something new and coming out with just building out something that doesn't exist before. But in terms of things that have worked well and which I feel like I absolutely very happy about having done that is picking a problem that we relate to. It doesn't mean that you have to have experienced it, etc., but you should be able to relate very strongly to that problem because ultimately, everything else changes. The technology that you use changes, the market dynamics change. You discover a lot about the user, the customer, the buyer,
Mm,
the market, the willingness to pay, etc. The one thing that doesn't change is the problem. The problem remains because that's why you started in the first place. So I would like something that worked really well for us is just picking a problem that we really liked. When I say we didn't like the problem existing, we liked the fact that, okay, this is a problem worth solving. And we were really interested in solving it. We felt like, if nothing else, we would love for this problem to get solved. And that's something that we started with. And that kind of really helps. It helps you stay focused. Like I said, focus is the problem. It helps you stay focused. It helps you build conviction around what you're selling. Because if you're not convinced, it's very hard to convince the customer or the buyer
mm,
that this is something that's going to work. You need to be convinced first that this is a problem worth solving. So finding a problem that you think is worth solving, that you relate to, that you find super interesting, I think that's also very important. Because there's a lot of like ups and downs in the journey.
yeah.
I would argue that, I mean, I don't think I need to argue this point with anyone, but there's probably a lot more downs than ups. So to actually be able to go through it, you need to be super interested in what you're doing. You need to have fun while doing it. And I think
Love
a
that.
large part of yeah, I think a large part of having fun every day just comes from a couple of things, which is enjoying what you do, like solve an interesting problem, take interesting technology. Like me and my co-founder and the rest of the Kusho team, all of us love technology. All of us are excited by AI and technology in general. All of us love to use technology to solve problems, and that's something that ties all of us together. So even if we have a bad day, we have product
Mm,
failures, we have sales failures, marketing failures, etc. It's okay because at the end of the day, we're still doing something that all of us really enjoy. So I think that's really helped. And the second part is very related, but working with people that you enjoy working with. I think that's
Yes,
something really,
that's a
really
big
helpful.
one.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, again, goes back to the same thing, right? There's going to be a lot of hard moments. There's going to be tough days to get through. If you really enjoy working with the people you work with, you'll still come back the next day and want to take another shot at solving the problem. So I think, yeah, it's just these two things. I feel like do something that you enjoy every day. So, like build in an industry that you really relate to, or, like use technology that you love to use. And that's what's going to make you come back every day with the same enthusiasm and the same kind of focus and energy to continue building. And the people aspect always helps. I think people are the largest part of any business. At the end of the day, I personally believe that it's all about the people. So if you enjoy working with, and it's not just about the team, right? So the team's one aspect of it, but like even the users, right? So look at who you spend most of your time with, right? You'll spend time with your team. You'll spend a lot of time
Yeah.
talking to your users. So you should be interested in their work, what they do, their lives, what motivates them, what are their problems, what would add value to their lives. Even the customers, the buyers, I think everybody needs to be on the same page. I would say that I think that is probably the biggest aspect of this whole journey. I think if you get that right, I think you'll get, or you'll stay in the game long enough to get everything else right. So
Yeah. No, I love
yeah,
that advice. I think, yeah, I mean, there's always going to be bad days. Mistakes are always going to happen. But yeah, you're right. If you're surrounded by the right people, that they just make it easier. And if you have a purpose and you know that the problem you're solving isn't, a very much needed problem to be solved and that there is a market for it, then I guess that drives you, gets you through the bad days, I suppose. So yeah, no, I appreciate that advice. Now I love to end on a positive note. So my final question for you today is, what are you looking forward to in the future?
yeah, I think yeah, thank you so much for like I think sending that question my way. But for me, I think like I said, I think it's a lot of it is just about seeing this technology that we have access to and a future that we've dreamed up kind of um, sort of become reality. I feel like that's my biggest motivator, and that's what I look forward to the most. We want to make software development fun. I think that's something that we don't use it as like a marketing line or something, but it's something that we believe internally. We want to make software development more fun. We want to make it easier.
Yeah.
We want to make it more fun. We want to let people be more creative. I think we take steps towards that goal every day, and I think that's what we're looking forward to as well. Extremely excited to see how AI changes the world over the next decade or so, and looking forward to playing a reasonably significant part, hopefully, in making that happen. I think technology brings with it a lot of positive changes. I think like you said, and there are certain negatives that everyone sees right now, but humanity as a whole kind of tends to figure out a lot of these problems out. I think we've figured out solutions to bigger problems in the past. Uh, Technology has always eventually made life better over time. I think that's what's going to happen with this as well. There's
Yeah.
going to be ups and downs, but it's going to reach a steady state. I think something that we also would love to play a part in, make human beings' lives easier. I guess that's the overarching goal. But yeah, that's what we look forward to, and that's why we are here doing this.
That's so refreshing to hear that. Abhishek, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you sharing all that knowledge and insights, and inspiration with us today. Pleasure having
Thank you for
you.
having me. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I think this has been a lot of fun. Love the questions that you asked, and yeah, being very supportive through this whole conversation. Thank you so much. I love talking to you.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.